Welcome to the WTR Small-Cap Spotlight podcast. I'm your host, Shawn Severson, CEO and founding partner of Water Tower Research. Today, we're excited to be joined by Sebastian Toke, CEO of GCL Holdings. GCL Holdings is a vertically integrated games and entertainment platform across distribution, publishing, hardware, and peripherals. Also joining us is my WTR Equity Research colleague, James Kisner. I'm going to go ahead and start with the first question, Sebastian. And starting with for listeners who are new to the company, new to GCL, what is the quick elevator pitch and what makes GCL unique in the gaming industry?
Sure. Thanks, Shawn. And firstly, I'm happy to be here. Happy to take some time to kind of share the business with you guys as well. But as an overarching view of GCL, think of us as an ecosystem, right? The business started off as game distribution. And from game distribution, we went into game publishing. Then we became our own game developer where we're working on our own IP. We've invested in other game studios as well. And with the most recent strategic acquisition, we've gone into gaming hardware as well. So as an overarching view, think of GCL as all things games related, gaming IP, gaming software, and now gaming hardware, all in one group. Yeah.
Thanks for that, Sebastian. So again, you talk about this ecosystem spanning distribution, publishing, and hardware. So how do you tie all those pieces together? Like, what's the vision there?
So that's a good question, actually. When you look at gaming as a whole, it's centered around IP, right? So that's one of the reasons why we've been around for almost 2 decades right now. We started a business in 2007, and by a huge stroke of luck, we started as the exclusive game distributor for GTA, Grand Theft Auto 4, back in 2007. So business has grown tremendously since then, and over this last 18 years, we were sitting on so much consumer data that we understood that the consumer patterns around gaming is constantly evolving. So as time went by, we went into game publishing where we started looking out for game IPs, game studios to kind of invest in. So that was really moving the business upstream as well. So game distribution, game publishing, and eventually having our own development studio in-house and investing in third-party studios as well. Now, all this is really centered around IP. Because when you look at video gaming IP, I think the writing is on the wall. The gaming industry today, I think, is going through what we would call a transmedia approach, where a good gaming IP, for example, you look at Mario, Sonic, it's made its way into a movie adaptation, TV animation. So as GCL continues to grow its business around video games and around not just investing in IP, but developing our own IP, it's centered around creating content. So with the acquisition of hardware, Leong, which is the target that we've acquired, is a strong business in Southeast Asia. They've been one of the leading distributors for some of your biggest consumer electronics and hardware today. So with IP at the very core of GCL's business and hardware, we get to do things like IP collaboration, creating new limited edition consumer electronics products, and we're opening up new geographical markets. So it's really centered around IP, video gaming IP that translates into media as well. And I have Keith, my deputy CEO, that just joined me as well. So we have a team here today. But long story short, it's centered around IP, building around the peripheral industries around video games as well.
Oh, thank you for that. That's very helpful. All right, let's just talk about some recent results. So FY25 was a breakout year for you guys. Revenue is 142 million, up nearly 50%. So impressive. So beyond the blockbuster releases, what fundamentals are really driving that growth, and which feel repeatable in FY26?
Okay. So I think FY25, while it's a breakout year, I think it's just the inflection point. It's the proof that the business is growing in the right direction, right? Because when you look at us as an ecosystem, FY25 saw growth across all business units. We saw good growth in game distribution, where we grew 30% in terms of the number of units sold in game distribution. Game publishing grew by 367% as well. So in the publishing business where we're investing in IP, bringing IP to the global markets, that business has thrived in the last 3 years since it was last incepted in 2022. Game development, of course, is a business unit that we continue to engage in, continue to work on. Our own IP will not be ready for a couple of years now, but we're constantly working on it. But FY25 is a true testimony that the ecosystem works. There's a lot of integration. There's a lot of symbiotic relationship between all these business units. But where I'm personally really excited about would be this current financial year, because with FY26, we've done the large acquisition for consumer electronics and hardware. So I think the integrated business with software and hardware will truly show this year. And in FY26, 27, that's where you see us more as an integrated ecosystem surrounding both gaming software and gaming hardware as well.
Very exciting stuff. Okay. Let's talk about a specific initiative. You were the global physical publisher for Black Myth Wukong, which was massive.
Right. That's right.
What did that success teach you about global appetite for Asian developed games?
Well, the title was truly a blessing to the gaming industry. Why I would say so is because it's a proof that when you have a good game, a good storyline, especially if it's off the back of a 5,000-year-old cultural story, as long as the gameplay works, the storyline works, and you kind of build a beautiful narrative around the game, it still works. So I think where you would see Black Myth, and of course, Black Myth was a hallmark success for us as a company as well, because GCL was the exclusive global physical publisher, as you've mentioned. So it was one of the factors that drove the success behind FY25. But more so than just the title alone, and this was something that I forgot to mention in that previous point. While we were recognized as the exclusive global partner for one of the biggest game last year, that became a recognition point, right? GCL was recognized as the exclusive partner for a huge AAA title coming up from the Asian markets. So with that really opened up a lot of conversations with studios in the East, in the West, and that's where we were building on our brand equity as well. Now, on the title of Black Myth again, right? I think the success of Black Myth just shows that the gaming industry as a whole, it doesn't view whether a game is coming out from the East or the West. I think gamers as a whole, they're hungry for content, or should I say good content. You put across a good game, a good content, a good narrative, good gameplay, and the industry rewards you. So I think that was really what Black Myth shows. And more so than that, I think it was an illuminating point that there are a lot of good game studios coming out from Asia. And I think the next few years will be an exciting time where a lot of all these indie studios, AA studios, they're creating a lot of good content. And I think this period is quite an exciting time to be a gamer, because the tidal shift of gaming appetite is coming towards the Asian markets as well, which is exciting for us to be looking at the overall industry coming from Singapore, where we're based in.
Okay. I'm going to, again, just to close, kind of close the loop here on the publishing business and this meaningful step up you've seen. Has anything changed in terms of the playbook, in terms of scouting, partnerships, marketing, or live ops that may be driving all the success?
So publishing business can either be a very science-based approach or a very arts-based approach. So just to explain to the viewer who might not be too familiar with the game publishing business, it's primarily picking a game IP that you're keen on, investing capital to be the publishing partner, formulating go-to-market strategies, getting to the technical part of the business, and essentially you're the partner for the game developer, right? So why do I say that it can either be a science-based approach or an arts-based approach? Is because if you were a standalone game publisher, picking a game title would pretty much involve some level of guesswork, right? You take the game, you test it within your team, you assess the game within your publishing team, and you make a judgment call. So I think where GCL really stands out is that as a full ecosystem, we've been sitting on 18 years of sales data, sales consumer data on what kind of games would sell well, the different categories of games that will sell well in different regions, Asia, Europe, US, just sales data that helps us understand the ever-changing consumer pattern as well. So as a game comes to us with a standalone game publishing unit called For Divinity, which is a fully owned subsidiary within GCL, we assess the game not just within our game publishing arm, but we connect to a game distribution business unit as well. We say, hey, test this game. Let us know what is the demand that you would assess from the game demo. And within Asia, of course, we would have our different market heads look at it. So it's kind of a book building process where we're kind of book building like the soft demand that comes to the game demo as well. So for us, it's a lot more science based, where we're testing the game. We're assessing it in terms of the number of units that the market might be able to accept. And then, we add on different factors like whether it's still relevant, whether it's going to be a crowded space. So from a totality approach, we assess the game across all business units. And thereby, and this allows our engagement with the game developer to be a lot more holistic, right? We formulate the marketing strategy, the go-to-market strategy, and of course, now with a game development unit in-house, we're able to kind of provide co-development support for game studios as well. So short answer is yes, the way we approach game publishing has evolved from largely a standalone unit in the past where, we didn't think that consumer data was that important, to now understanding that game publishing is just a piece of the entire industry where, at the end of the day, we just want to make a game work and, provide all the support that we can as an ecosystem as well.
Oh, that's helpful. That sounds a lot like maybe initial public offering of stock, building a book. So let's turn to some strategic initiatives. Let's talk about Showa American Story, which, if my numbers are right, has generated 200 million plus previous views and engagement across platforms. So what makes this title so special, and what should players expect on timing and platforms?
So this IP, Showa American Story, has amassed a staggering amount of view. It was a controversial IP. So when we chanced upon the IP back in 2024, somewhere late 2023, we were assessing the game IP. And at the point of assessment, there was only one trailer that was out in the public domain, right? Its first trailer back in 2022. When we assessed the IP, we looked at the trailer. The first thought that came to me, and I remember this clearly, was that, wow, the narrative and the gameplay and the way that, the entire story was building out, it was really controversial. It was similar to another IP that was on Amazon Prime, which is Man on a High Castle, right? Man on a High Castle on Amazon Prime, pretty controversial storyline, where in an alternate timeline, the Nazis won the World War, went on to rule the world, spun off 4 seasons, amassed a great number of fans as well. So in Showa American Story, in the public trailer that you might have seen as well, the storyline itself is a very creative way of world building. In this world of Showa American Story, it stipulates a time where Japan is in its golden era. So Showa is a period between 1926 to 1989. But in this storyline itself, in this alternate timeline, it was Japan that won the World War, and that US had fallen under the Japanese colony as well. So very interesting timeline. And of course, it's a dystopian timeline as well because, the world had suffered from a massive zombie outbreak. I don't want to give you too much spoilers right now, but I would say that it's a story that's controversial, that's funny. It's just pure storytelling at its best. It takes a lot of reference point from, some of the historic milestones as we're growing up as kids from the 80s. It kind of shows how old I am as well. But, huge milestones from the 80s, from the 90s. And there's a certain sense of nostalgia in the game itself. So I think as a gamer, when you're watching the trailer and you're looking at the game play out, I think the first thing that hits you is this is a game that's paying homage to the retro era of the 80s. Really interesting storyline. And because it's controversial, I think it's a fresh narrative of what the gaming industry is looking out for today as well. So that's Showa. We're really excited for the launch of the game. Things are coming up, but I'll leave it to when we launch it publicly as well.
Wow, 80s and 90s dystopia. So I'm sold, and I have to carve out some time for that. Let's switch to your acquisition of Leong, which I believe adds hardware distribution to your portfolio. So how does that help complete the ecosystem and create value for shareholders? And what are the near-term proof points that we should look for?
Sure. So we were assessing the Ban Leong deal for more than a year. And this was around the time when we were formulating the overarching strategy for GCL as well. As you've seen some of the public announcements that we've made, we've been constantly investing in game studios as well. So like Showa, for example, we are a 20% shareholder, but at the same time, we're the global publisher as well, right? So as a global publisher of Showa American Story, it allows us some vested rights into the IP in understanding how we can formulate the growth and the trajectory of the IP, building out transmedia, as I spoke about, and ultimately doing IP collaboration as well. So when we assess Ban Leong has been around in the industry for more than 3 decades. In terms of the business, it's a very stable business, and over the last 5 years, they've really benefited from the growth of a few industries that are now, I think, the main talk of the town, right? So you've seen AI companies growing tremendously over the last 5 years. In Asia, we see a lot of AI startups. In Asia, we've seen a lot of game studios that have been growing quite nicely as well. Web3 companies, research companies. Now, all these tech-based companies, they require a lot of hardware support. So Ban Leong is in a business where they're distributing things like laptops, graphic cards, servers, high-powered PCs, monitors, basically hardware that supports the growth of the tech industry as a whole. So as we saw Ban Leong's growth, we thought that it would play an integral part in our ecosystem build out. Because think about it, James. If I gave you, let's say, a laptop, right, and you're a gamer, but within the laptop there's no gaming software, you can't game without your gaming software. On the flip side, if I gave you like a PS5 copy of a particular game, but you do not have the console, then that PS5 copy is as good as paperweight. So all these years, it's software that has driven the demand for hardware. And this is exactly like what we saw in Black Myth Wukong last year, where a lot of gamers or first-time gamers, they were pulled in by the hype of Black Myth. They either upgraded their PC to becoming a gaming rig, or they've bought a new gaming laptop just to kind of game on Black Myth as well. So all this while, and this kind of reinforced the idea that strong IP and strong content that we're putting out will eventually lead to demand of hardware as well. So Ban Leong represents that side of the business, and when you put it all into a group, it makes a lot of sense.
Awesome. It's good stuff. So let's talk about one of my kids' favorite platforms, Switch. You pointed to that as a major opportunity. Without revealing any trade secrets, without revealing any trade secrets, how is GCL positioning to capitalize on that console refresh?
Okay, so it's always an exciting time for a gaming company around the launch of a new console. The last time before Switch 2 was launched, I think we experienced PS5 during the COVID years. It was during COVID, everyone is homebound, right? You had to find a certain form of entertainment, and home entertainment became the main form of entertainment. So when PS5 was released, I mean, barring the technical factors between supply chain issues and whatnot, um, around the period of a new console release, it's usually, or at least this sales revenue or number of units sold would usually peak within the first 2 to 3 years. We saw that in PS5 and in Switch 2 numbers as well. We're seeing that the velocity of the trade is, the velocity of the sales is especially high within the first 3 months of the release. But consumers and investors have to understand that it's not just the console that sells. In the earlier point that I just made, if the console sells well, the next thing that follows too would be the games that has to sell as well. Because you're not buying a Switch 2 and you're just, you're not just going to stick to Switch 1 games, because with developers that are developing games for the Switch console, they're developing Switch 2 native games as well. So with the release of Switch 2, you're seeing a whole suite of Switch 2 native games that have been released. And we've been in the business with some of the biggest publishers, and we've had exclusive distribution rights to some of the biggest franchise in the gaming industry today. So with the Switch 2 console, some of the titles that are coming out that has done really well is basically under our domain. So titles like Yakuza, titles like Cyberpunk. So some of these big titles that are coming out for Switch 2 is distributed by us in the Asian region, including China markets as well. So while we do not have like a direct, uh, uh, like a pop or a benefit from the Switch 2 console, but the game side, the distribution of the games, uh, going into game publishing for future titles that are going to be released on the Nintendo Switch console, that's the business that we're in today.
Awesome. Thank you for that. So I'm going to shift gears and talk about mobile for a minute. So your subsidiary for Divinity, which you mentioned earlier, secured global mobile publishing rights, I guess with the exception of Singapore and Malaysia, for Kingdom Under Fire, the Civil
Right.
War, with a targeted commercial launch by 2025 end. How important is mobile to GCL's future, and especially in Asian markets?
Okay, well, that's a good question. I'd like to zoom out a little bit, right? So instead of just reiterating or at least verbalizing how important the mobile game industry is to GCL, we'll look at the entire game industry as a whole. When you look at the entire video game industry as a whole, I think public figures would point that about 49% of the video game industry is powered by mobile games, and 51% is powered by PC and console. So the split between mobile, PC, and console has been right down the middle for the past few years. So mobile games is truly like half of the gaming industry today. However, the risk of going into mobile game development is extremely different. So in the last 18 years of our business, we've stayed true to being in PC and console because it's a space that we're so familiar with, right? We're able to kind of mitigate risks by having our sales channels. You know, we are a global business today. We're across 12 countries in the world. We understand the geographical risk that comes with game development as well. But with the game development in mobile, it's very different. And I'll just spend a few minutes just talking about this. When you develop a PC and console game, the way you monetize it is through the sale of the game, right? I would say about 9 out of 10 games that you're selling in PC and console would just be a one-time purchase. You sell the game and then you monetize it through additional content like DLCs, downloadable contents. That's in the PC and console space. So from the developer standpoint, we kind of assess and we get to approximate what's the game sales that will come with the game launch based on a few factors. But in the mobile space, the monetization is not through the sale of the game. You'd be spending like 10 million, 20 million in developing a mobile game. But the monetization model is through in-app purchases, in-app top-ups, in-app credits. So it's a whole life cycle. You're entering into the whole life service side of things. And if we look at just the universe of games, because it's such a low barrier of entry for mobile game development, I'd say that the denominator of games in the PC and console space is a lot smaller than in the mobile gaming space. So we've taken a very measured approach in understanding games in general for almost 2 decades, understanding what kind of IP would work. And therefore, when we looked at Kingdom Under Fire, it's an IP that's been around for almost 20 years, almost 2 decades right now. And when we looked at Alliance Star, they've got a really, really strong team behind it. And, we spoke to the team, really strong development capabilities and the IP as well. So when we assessed the game, we thought that it was a game that fit our overall strategy. And therefore, we made our first move in investing into the studio and thereby getting the global publishing rights for Kingdom Under Fire as well.
Oh, very interesting. So let's talk about transmedia, in the Flywheel. You're building a games to film/series to merchandising Flywheel. So which IP might you see crossover first, and what guardrails do you use before greenlighting transmedia?
Right. I think when you talk about transmedia, the IP firstly has to be interesting, right? When you talk about interesting IP, the first thing that comes to my mind would be a controversial IP. In the earlier example that I mentioned for Showa, there's actually been a lot of interest on the IP since the release of the trailer. We've had different parties actually approach us, just kind of mooting the idea of potentially getting it into a transmedia project as well. So it shows that if you have a strong IP or at least a strong storyline or an interesting take on how you would kind of play out in your world building approach, that that usually translates to a potential transmedia approach as well. So off the top of my head, I would say Showa is a really good candidate for transmedia. Um, in terms of the story, it's looking out to be a massive game. Really interesting storyline that plays out. A lot of humor in the game building as well. So I think that usually translates to a nice storyline that can be adapted into either a movie adaptation or a TV series as well. Now I think the second idea, or at least the second transmedia target that we think is possible, would be the Defiant. It's an IP that we've announced. It was a recent IP in September that we've announced that we've secured global publishing rights for. So the Define is, I would say, think of it as the first ever Asian rendition of Call of Duty. It's an FPS game. It's done by a veteran team that's been making FPS games for quite a while now. And the IP circles around like your World War II spy versus spy, stories of personal sacrifices. It really pays homage to the period of World War II from an Asian lens. So that I think has a lot of potential for a transmedia play as well into a movie adaptation for not just the Asian markets, but I think the storyline itself would be applicable to anyone that would be keen for a good war movie as well. So I think The Defiant and Showa would be two immediate candidates that I think is possible.
That sounds really cool. Just a couple more for us. What's the one upcoming release from Milestone that has you most excited for FY26?
Okay. So FY26, I think the biggest event for this year was the completion of the acquisition for Banleong. So I would say that FY26 is the year of integration because firstly, Banleong was a big Singapore listed company that we privatized. And privatizing a company and integrating it into an overall ecosystem is not a walk in the park. It doesn't happen overnight, and it takes a lot of effort and resources to kind of gel everything together. Now, bear in mind that it's an exercise that we've been developing for more than a year before we executed the acquisition. So a lot of deep planning on integration, on shifting resources, building new markets, building new product lines, all this are ongoing right now. So I think the biggest milestone for FY26 would be the acquisition and the integration, but more so, I think FY26 has also been a hallmark where we're securing all this huge IP, right? We have Showa that we secured, we have Define, we have Sword Sage, we have Realm of Ink. We just recently announced the game that we're developing ourselves, which is Island of Heart. We're leveraging off the influencer business that we have in Asia. So it's a hallmark that while we're integrating the hardware side of the business, the IP business unit is blossoming quite well as well. So FY26 is really, I wouldn't even call it a transition year. It's really an integration year and a coming of age for both publishing and game development. So FY27 and 28 is really where the numbers will start to show as well.
Okay, thanks for that. Just to wrap things up and kind of put a bow on that. So, investors are very metric driven. If we reconnect in a year, what achievements or set of metrics would make you most proud to share with investors?
I think without giving any guidance, just want to thread on areas that I can thread on, right? With the blossoming of the game publishing business, and of course with our own IP, which is Island of Hearts, being developed by our own in-house studio, the game development and the game publishing units are the high margin parts of the business. Game distribution, hardware, consumer electronics, that's stable. That's ongoing, and the numbers are usually quite big. But that's just a stable business where margins are sideways, right? It's nothing exciting. It's not going to pop up anytime soon. But I think, if we reconnect 1 year from now with the launch of some of the big IP that we have, I would say that in terms of the metrics, I think when you look at the profitability, you should see a nice evolution from what we were generating from before to what we're moving towards, which is a blended business that's focusing a lot more on IP, where it's higher margins in general.
Thanks for that, Sebastian. You give me quite a shopping list with Showa and Defiant and Christmas coming up. So I'm going to hand it back to Shawn to wrap us up.
Great. Thanks, James. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today. And especially thank you, Sebastian,
Thank you.
CEO of GCL Holdings, for participating today. It was great having you on. Thanks for everyone for listening today. And please don't forget to subscribe as well. And make sure you visit www.watertowerresearch.com. Lots of information on there, podcasts, research, fireside chats. Stay up to speed on all of our written research, as well as the other channels that we write research through. So again, we're excited to have you. We look forward to seeing you next time for another edition of the WTR Small Cap Spotlight podcast. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.